Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, of course, we have some old viruses that we once thought were eradicated.
Making a comeback.
Rearing its ugly head once again, but not just out in the country somewhere. These are in well-populated areas. In fact, at some very popular universities in California. We're also going to look at during the Easter holiday, Sri Lanka had some major bombings that took place, which has taken the lives of several people. And of course, we're going to take a look at the plans that Trump administration has in regards to this very, very secretive peace plan that we know that Jared Kushner is working on. Been visiting a lot of people, but so far it's been very hush-hush. First, we're going to take a look at a mystery fungal infection that has been placed on the CDC's urgent threat list. The infection, called Candida auris, is resistant to treatment, classified as a drug-resistant germ. The cases in New York have grown from 7 to 14 in the last year, and the CDC has warned healthcare workers to take extra precaution because the epidemic is growing.
Well, so just how serious is the infection? Well, at one hospital where it was discovered that a patient was infected with the fungus, after the patient was removed, the entire room was considered a biohazard. The walls, the blinds, the bedding, flooring, and so forth had to be sanitized afterwards. Now, Dr. Nita Ogden recounted of a case in London where a room was aerosolized with sodium hydroxide, and afterwards one organism regrew. Now, interestingly, Candida strains are part of our gut microbiome, but this strain is targeting people with weakened immune systems as well as those who take the immunosuppressive drugs.
That's pretty scary because sodium hydroxide is a very caustic,
Very
powerful, used to actually unclog drains mixture that even that fungus was able to regrow after being exposed to it. Well, Dr. Ogden said that this is headed in the direction of affecting healthy people with none of the common risk factors associated with today's victims. Drug-resistant infections are also more expensive to treat than drug-sensitive infections, more than double, and the mortality rate is more than double as well for those who are infected with these drug-resistant infections. Of course, Candida auris symptoms are dependent on where it infects the body, and shockingly, nearly half of the patients who contracted Candida auris died within 90 days.
Wow. Also, why the sudden overgrowth of this type of fungus? Well, one theory by scientists is that because farmers are using more fungicides to stem rot in plants, and the crops might be a contributing factor. So I guess it's one of those, they're mutating and actually resisting. That's where we get the resistant strains of certain diseases and funguses and so forth that now scientists are very worried about.
Yeah, it kind of makes you a little bit scared, but also wonder if we know about bacteria and the antibiotics, overtreatment of antibiotics, the fungus and the fungicides, the overuse of fungicides in crops and so forth. What other things are industries using to try to prevent, contamination or rot or bugs or some type of infestation? How is that affecting our food, and what is that going to do to humanity as a result, as we see these things mutating and causing uncontrollable, uncurable sicknesses? Right. Well, a new study has revealed that shaking hands longer than 10 seconds could spread your DNA to things that you've never touched. Forensic scientists conducted handshaking experiments, and in their study showed about 7% of the time a person's DNA became a major source on the knife. This was a knife that they had never even touched. Now, it was transferred when a person handshaking partner grabbed the handle of the knife afterwards.
Well, in another experiment, when a communal pitcher was used, everyone's DNA showed up on each person's cup, even though each individual only handled their own cup and the pitcher itself. Now, in this instance, long or even brief contact with the object could spread the DNA to various other people and objects.
Kind of makes you hope that people wash their hands
Absolutely.
when they use the bathroom. Well, two major Southern California university colleges have over 100 students and staff under quarantine because of a recent measles outbreak in the schools. 71 students and 127 staff at Cal State in Los Angeles have possibly were exposed to the measles at a campus library. Well, they are now under quarantine. At UCLA, 76 students and 6 faculty members are under quarantine as well after a contagious student attended classes. These recent cases come at a time when the government says that measles cases across the nation are increasing dramatically.
Well, at UCLA, a student attending classes for 3 days possibly put hundreds at risk. Now, the university has identified and quarantined dozens who could have been exposed, and they will remain so until records can confirm their immunity, which could be anywhere from 24 hours to 7 days. Now, more than 3/4 of those exposed had not been vaccinated or did not receive the recommended 2 doses.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, at UCLA, one of the members there said that, over 2,000 people visit that library a day. And of course, people don't sign in. They just kind of come, they go, they study, they leave. So we don't really know the final outcome of what potentially who could have been exposed to this measles until, people start coming down.
It's almost impossible when you have that many people coming and going to track them all down.
Yeah, and then you kind of see how fast things can spread, especially when you take into consideration travel through airplanes and things like that. Well, we're going to turn it over to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has some updates, or at least news regarding the recent bombings that have taken place in Sri Lanka. These took place on Easter. And, of course, some things that are taking place in Libya and how the U.S. is kind of getting its hands involved in that as well. Larry, what do you have for us?
As the religious wars continue to rage and the hostility and animosity among the nations continues to build, the effect is an environment where not even religious holidays are safe from violence. The latest bombing in Sri Lanka is a case in point, where an attack killed approximately 207 people during the Christian celebration of Easter. Starting with the church, there is reported to have been a total of 8 explosions, which brought large-scale destruction and grief to the nation's inhabitants. Unsettling images and video from the aftermath of the attacks show blood accompanied by anguished screams as disoriented victims of the bombing struggle to comprehend their predicament. So far, 7 people have been arrested in connection with the attacks. The Prime Minister of the country is promising a stern response. The angry response of scores of people in Libya was on display recently as protests erupted in the country's capital to denounce military action being launched to take Tripoli. The offense is reportedly being conducted by Libyan warlord and oil baron Khalifa Haftar, who the citizens believe is actually a puppet for outside influences such as France, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, who they suspect are the ones truly instigating violence in the country. The protests reportedly broke out after the public received news of a call from President Trump to Khalifa supporting his efforts. They believe Haftar was handpicked by the U.S. to replace the country's former leader, Muammar Gaddafi, and now that he has been executed, they see America and their accomplices as trying to finish the job by installing Khalifa as the nation's leader. They say they want true freedom, however, which to them is a government elected by the people. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Good time, Jeff. Back to you.
By the sound of that report, Katan, it seems that the people in Libya are still convinced that the U.S. is there trying to secure the oil.
That's right.
Well, the Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro says the United States is waging an economic war on his country through the layering of sanctions. But the Venezuela government is doing its best to stay afloat and bypass the sanctions as much as possible with the help of its closest allies from around the globe.
This comes as John Bolton, the U.S. National Security Advisor, made the announcement that there would be more sanctions applied to the South American country, this time targeting Venezuela's central bank. He said the aim was, quote, to restrict transactions with this bank and prohibit its access to U.S. dollars.
However, Venezuela is countering this measure by sending cash through Russia. Now, according to a report by Reuters, they explained Venezuela's state oil company, PDVSA, has started passing invoices from its oil sales to Rosneft, a Russia's state-controlled oil company, which then pays PDVSA immediately at a discount to the sale price, which avoids the usual 30 to 90-day time frame for completing oil transactions, and then they follow up by collecting the full amount later from the buyer.
But Venezuela is not the only country feeling the burden of these sanctions. The U.S. island territory of Puerto Rico already suffered financially from Hurricane Maria in 2017, as well as new austerity measures in 2018, is also feeling the impact of the newest sanctions on Venezuela. The sanctions will prevent Puerto Rico's offshore banks, several of which are owned by Venezuelan citizens, from opening an account with the New York State Federal Reserve that gives them access to the U.S. financial system.
Well, in an interview with Russia Today, Vladimir Zaimsky, Russian ambassador to Venezuela, condemned the United States' attempts to overthrow the Maduro government, saying it's as if they were believers in a very strange religion that also tried to dictate something to the United States and other countries. They are trying to introduce their way of seeing things, their posture, their vision of the world on others, and that, he said, is not right.
The Russian ambassador compared the U.S. to al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, explaining further that he thinks the U.S. is trying to enforce its Monroe Doctrine from 1823 on the Venezuelan people. That doctrine discouraged European countries from further colonization of the Americas, so basically telling the Eastern Hemisphere to stay out of the Western Hemisphere.
Well, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has also weighed in on the topic. Pompeo recently traveled to Cucuta, a border city in Colombia known for helping Venezuelans seeking refuge from the harsh reality in their own country. Pompeo said the current situation in Venezuela is the most critical of all issues in South America right now. Now, the Secretary of State said he will continue to support the opposition leader, Juan Guaido.
Pompeo also called for Maduro to allow the U.S.'s humanitarian aid, which has been sitting along the border for about 9 months now, to enter the country. However, Maduro will not accept the aid for fear it will allow the U.S. military to intervene and overthrow his country.
Well, during his visit, Pompeo also criticized Cuba and Russia for their continued support of the Maduro government. Echoing President Trump's words, the secretary said, "We've made clear that all options are on the table, and you watch the political and diplomatic noose tighten around Maduro's neck. We will begin to do the same thing."
Well, Pompeo continued, the Cubans must understand, too, that there will be a cost associated with their continued support of Nicolas Maduro. We've had that same conversation with the Russians as well. He also accused China of lengthening the crisis in Venezuela by not joining the U.S. in condemning the regime.
Well, Beijing's foreign ministry spokesman Liu Kang, in a statement, accused the U.S. of treating Latin America like it belonged to them, saying to pressure, threaten, and even subvert political power in other countries at every turn.
Meanwhile, Juan Guaido continues to travel across Venezuela, appearing at large rallies and visiting small hometowns as talk of his arrest by the government continues. Guaido spoke with reporters about this, stating, "I think it would be a great error of the regime. It would be a great blunder to arrest me, especially with what this part of the movement represents at this stage."
Guaido continued to explain and give a warning, saying, "To capture who is leading the process at this important stage for our country, who also has international recognition, who has an alternative plan for the country, would only further deepen the crisis, and the consequences would undoubtedly be suffered first by the regime."
But Venezuela is not the only country in turmoil these days. Of course, the decades-long struggle between the Israelis and Palestinians continues. However, President Donald Trump is optimistic that with the re-election of Benjamin Netanyahu as Prime Minister of Israel, makes way for a real opportunity at peace with the Palestinians.
Well, of course, the Trump administration has been promising a peace plan for 2 years now, but there is a talk of it being unveiled soon. However, very few have been allowed to see even a draft of this proposal. Now, the authors of the new peace plan, mainly Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt, have gone to extraordinary lengths to keep it confidential in a White House that has been filled with political leaks.
That's right. Reuters White House correspondent Steve Holland explains the main people who have access to the plan are Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, former lawyer to President Trump and currently a White House senior advisor, along with the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, and of course one of Kushner's top deputies, Avi Berkowitz.
Now, Holland explains why they don't want to divulge much information, saying the reason for the secrecy or their secrecy is they don't want little parts of it to get out in the Middle East and the government start critiquing little pieces of it instead of the document as a whole. They'd rather people take a look at the document on its own merits when they decide to put it out.
Kushner, in his own words, told Arabian Sky News, quote, "Hopefully, if we can resolve this issue, we'll be able to see a lot more opportunity for the Palestinian people and for Israeli people and people throughout the region." Earlier this year, Kushner traveled to Israel, the Palestinian territories, and the Arab Gulf states to meet with officials and seek their input. However, he gave them little insight as to what was contained in the proposal.
Now, many feel this extreme secrecy is due to the clearly pro-Israeli stance the Trump administration has taken, which several of those moves have been moving the embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the highly disputed Golan Heights, as well as cutting international aid to the Palestinian territory of Gaza.
And the Prime Minister of Israel acknowledged this himself. In a statement when visiting the White House, Netanyahu said Israel has been blessed to have many friends who sat in the Oval Office, but Israel has never had a better friend than you, referring to Donald Trump.
Well, one big question, will the peace plan call for a two-state solution? Now, the Arabs have been demanding an independent state for the Palestinian people from the beginning, but this question has yet to be answered. While the senior White House official says President Trump has been briefed on Kushner's plan, it is unclear if he has read the entire document. He has encouraged Kushner and his team, repeatedly saying, if you guys can get this done, you're going to be the greatest negotiators in history. And not only, Katan, will this actually make or be history, it's also going to be fulfilling Bible prophecy. And that we have been mentioning several broadcasts now. Yeshua Hawkins has mentioned and actually shown in the scriptures that this last part of this peace plan is from the original 7-year agreement that started in 1993, which was the Oslo Accord. So this last 3.5 years has its own set of prophecies that will go into effect when this peace plan starts up again. So very exciting times. The unveiling, many people are waiting for it. And you know, as we see and hear from the broadcast of Yeshua Hawkins, the prophecies at that time will continue, and that 3.5 years will stay in action. It won't be stopped anymore.
Right. And interestingly enough, from a prophetic stance, you know, Yeshua Hawkins and the House of Yahweh, they're looking forward to the revealing of this plan and how, of course, it ties into Bible prophecy. But, you know, on a secular level, people are also very excited to see what this plan will bring about because, as we've mentioned before, many administrations have tried to resolve the conflict in the Middle Eastern area, particularly between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and they've all fallen short so far.
Well, if you'd like to find out more about these stories, you can contact the House of Yahweh, and when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. And visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YeshuaHawkins.com, and Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can visit our website by going to ypnnews.com. To email the House of Yahweh, type in info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And of course, as we mentioned before, don't forget the best aid to studying the Holy Scriptures, the Yisrael Says and Ask Yisrael program, free online, available 24 hours a day for your studying needs. You can find that by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, another exciting message from Yisrael Hawkins explaining these last 3.5 years and how they tie into Bible prophecy. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.